Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, our special guest, Secretary of State John Merrill. Also, the V-Team takes a look at miracles, and Kay Ivey doesn't need any help.
You know you don't have to act with me, Steve. You don't have to say anything, and you don't have to do anything. Not a thing. Oh, maybe just whistle. You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.
Whatever. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V-Team. Welcome all.
How you doing? Hey, everybody.
Jack, Kay Ivey this week came out and rescinded the executive orders that Robert Bentley had put in place. She abolished commissions, committees, all sorts of things, saying that she was not kicking the can down the road. However, she threw away some cans that I think needed to be revealed, and that is she stopped the report from the Commission on Gaming from being released, and they were basically complete. She also stopped the work that was done on the grocery tax to take the tax off grocery. But let's just talk about this Commission on Gaming. They were done with their work. They were ready to release. Kay Ivey says, no, you're not getting it.
Kay the dismantler.
Yeah.
The new governor.
Yeah.
Is it to show a flexing of the muscle? I don't know. Is it to keep people in suspense on whether or not she's going to run again in 2018? Whatever reason, I think it was kind of despicable not to at least release this report. People had worked on it. People have put in time and resources. I'm sure it cost the state some money on per diem and meetings like that. I don't know what the danger of putting out the report would be unless she didn't like the outcome.
Well, I mean, Susan, we're talking about 18 different commissions, 2 of them very, very important, and here we have her just blowing them up. I mean, and the thing on the Gaming Commission is, our understanding is that they listed all the options and gave the pros and cons. People want to vote on this issue. Let's give them all the options.
Well, like Jack said, I think it may come out that she didn't like the way the report read, but I don't think that that's really an issue for her to decide. We're talking about getting a constitutional amendment here for the people to vote on. And like you said, I believe there were figures in there and the pros of how much revenue this could bring in, balanced out by what problems it could cause the state. So I think it would just be fair for people to be able to see the report. Like Jack said, you know, we've put resources as taxpayers into this report. Why can't we see it?
Beth, I mean, we're talking hundreds of people on all these over the state, putting in their time, their energy, and thinking they were doing a good job, and she just goes.
Right. Well, and I think to an extent, you know, we do have. Governor Bentley was bad about when there was a problem, rather than addressing it, saying, oh, let's make a commission and see what happens. But if we've got a commission that they've done their report, it's all finished, why don't we get to see the report rather than disband it? That's like, you know, building a house and when you're about to put the doorbell on it, being like, oh, never mind, we're done. You know?
It was the other guy's house. I don't like it.
Right.
Well, I think we have a right to know.
Well, here's the problem. People in this state want to vote on the lottery, up or down, one way or the other, and these chicken you-know-whats at the legislature won't let us vote on it. And people are going to get tired, and they're going to take it out on Mac McCutcheon. They're going to take it out on Del Marsh. They're going to take it out on Kay Ivey. Because people are sick of saying, we want to vote. one way or the other, and they will not give us that opportunity because of the damn lobbyists and the Indians and everybody else that are all protecting their turf. And the voters of this state are sick of it.
Well, I'm sick of the nanny state altogether. I mean,
Right.
you know, back when I thought there used to be a Republican Party that tried to stay out of your personal business. Now they all act like they're your personal. We got to be in all your business all the time. I mean, talk about getting government, shrinking the size and scope of government. They just moved it into the House.
I mean, it's more like not a nanny state because
Sorry.
a nanny doesn't know as much of your business as your mother does. And this Republican government, especially here in the state of Alabama, is like your mother. They know everything that you don't even know.
They need to be in the boardrooms of some of these sleazy corporations and out of the people's bedrooms.
Exactly.
And I'm really tired of this
Well, and
Republican Party in Alabama.
Just looking at the things that they should be doing versus the things they are doing, like our education system, where are we on that? You know, grocery tax is at least one of those things, one of the commissions that she disbanded. Let's talk about the grocery tax. That's something that's valid for the government to be working on and looking into because it's actually a problem that would have to go through a constitutional amendment. We'd have to go through that whole process. But the lottery, just throw it to a vote and be done with it.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the grocery tax, you know, as Robert Bentley one time said, I think it was him, you know, this is the only way we can tax poor people. Really? I mean,
yeah,
poor people
but we
are taxed
get rid
for
of the
that.
grocery tax, y'all. What are we going to replace it with? We're already hundreds of millions in a wretched black hole.
There's two competing options of ways to...
Cigarette tax, sorry,
No.
and the lottery would help fix this.
Well, I mean, so
And I'm good with both of them.
Senator
Yeah.
Dial's bill that he's pushed through the past few years, that replaces it by doubling the tax on non-food grocery items. So things you get at the grocery store, like deodorant, toilet paper, paper towels, those things. Now, poor people need those things too, so I don't know how that makes it less regressive of a tax, but, you know, whatever.
Well, you don't have to buy, you know, the Rolls Royce of toilet paper.
Have you ever used one-ply brick?
yeah, I was going to
Yeah, really. You know that never fly in our house.
But I mean, but then, you know, Representative Knight, he's had a plan too that would make it where, you know, in Alabama you can deduct the amount of federal taxes you pay from your state income taxes. So he basically just eliminates that deduction. It would only affect families earning, I believe, upwards of $300,000 a year. So the average Alabama family, we're talking an average annual income of $50,000 a year, that wouldn't bother them one bit.
We're going to have to hold that one right there. I want to get to this, Jack. Luther Strange's campaign or his surrogates have attacked Congressman Mo Brooks with some pretty vicious ads. Why do you think they're doing that?
Well, they want to keep him out of the runoff. I mean, Luther thinks that Roy's going to be in the runoff, Roy Moore. And Luther's fighting to be in the runoff, and Mo Brooks is nipping at his heels. So what do you do? Because your positive ads are horrible. I don't know who's doing them, but they ought to be fired. They're horrible. So he's having to go negative, and the best way to go negative is to attack Mo Brooks on what he's vulnerable on, and that is when he worked for Ted Cruz, he made disparaging remarks about Donald Trump. If he were smart, and he apparently is not, he would have come out and said, you need to know that I made those remarks about Trump because I was working for Cruz and I was wrong. I have changed my opinion on Trump. But he's too stubborn to do that, and it's going to cost him.
I think he said that he questioned the moral validity of Trump, and as a, you know, I mean, I don't think that's something that should disqualify somebody. I mean, you know, the man's been married 3 times. You know, he's done questionable things. I mean, these are facts, but of course we don't like facts anymore, do we, Beth?
We do not. And I mean, and the whole thing, it's just, you know, anybody who didn't at least question Donald Trump's ability to be president during the election needs their head checked. I mean, this is a man talking about grabbing women by parts that we can't discuss on TV.
Well, they say that was just locker room talk.
Yeah, whatever.
I don't care. It's inappropriate. It's sexual assault is what it is. And so, you know, I don't care. It's this race to the right is that I don't understand because Alabama's not a far right state. I don't care what anybody says. We are a very moderate state.
Well, you
What?
can't tell.
What?
You can't tell it by the laws.
Absolutely.
we
lost your mind.
Absolutely, we are a very moderate state.
Well, I don't know. The other thing that they're trying to do is out Jesus each other.
If we were a moderate state, Roy Moore wouldn't be leading the pack right now.
I'm saying there's fringes on both sides, but when you look at the average Alabama voter, I think they're somewhere in the middle.
You're probably right. Anyway, we're going to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more news and analysis. to the V, the voice of Alabama politics. Our very special guest today is Secretary of State John Merrill. Mr. Secretary.
Hey, Bill, great to be with you.
Great to have you on. You know, we've got a little new configuration here, bringing on the panel. It gets a little bit more lively. So we appreciate you indulging our experiment.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Your department, well, your Secretary of State, not really a department, but what you are doing has transformed the way that we all have been able to do business and the way that the state is being able to do business. And we'd like to get to that. But before that, we'd like to talk about the commission that's looking at voter fraud. There's been a lot of talk about it, pushback. Catch us up to what's happening.
Well, it's been dominating the news since June the 29th. Secretary Chris Kobach from Kansas actually issued a letter to all of the Secretary of States or chief election officials in each one of the 50 states requesting certain information that he would hope that those states would make available to him for the purpose of helping to identify fraudulent activity that was going on in those states, making comparisons and contrasts to see what needed to be addressed by the commission. And that has really created a firestorm.
Well, I mean, most states are very protective of that information. I know you've said that our state law doesn't even allow you to give that information.
No, not all of the information that he requested. And I think something else that really needs to be addressed, Bill, is that the letter did not come from the Presidential Commission on Election Integrity. It came from Secretary Kobach as the vice chair of the commission on his own volition. Wow. As a matter of fact, I was with several members of the commission at our most recent meeting of the National Association of Secretaries of State, and not one of them even knew that Chris was going to send out the letter. They got it the same time that we did. And that was really disappointing to them as members of the commission, but also disappointing to the commission overall, because when it was first publicly introduced, it was introduced in a negative light. And that's really unfortunate, because I know they want to do good work. I know we want to be supportive of the work that they're trying to do, but they put a number of people in a very difficult spot. And of course, there's been a firestorm in all 50 states regarding this issue. But I made my feelings known to Chris, and I know that some other secretaries did as well.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's one of those things, you know, where I think we're very suspicious down here of the federal government. So folks down here, I know this is Trump territory, but folks also are protective of what is, you know, our stuff. There's things in there that you just can't normally get, right?
No, and certainly, and we would never make information available to anybody that just wanted to purchase or gain access to that data that would put our voters in a compromising or vulnerable position. We would never do that, but there are certain things that are not allowable by law for us to distribute. For example, we're not going to provide the last 4 digits or your entire Social Security number. We're not going to provide your driver's license number. We're not going to provide your actual ballot. That's not even available to the voter once you've submitted it. That's why we have a secret ballot. There are things that, go ahead, Jack.
John, is this all a knee-jerk reaction to the Russian interference in the election?
Well, Jack, I feel like what President Trump was trying to do was he was trying to put together a task force to examine irregularities, inconsistencies, fraudulent activity that had been reported, anything that needed attention when it comes to having elections run in such a way that people could question whether or not the validity of the election was in question. And that's why we want to be supportive. That's why I was trying to encourage our people in Alabama to just kind of pay attention to where we were and to see what was going on. Let me add this. I think this is very, very important. As of last Friday, we had 3,271,666 voters in the state of Alabama. And we will make the information available to them or anyone else that would like to have it as long as they purchase it. And for them to purchase those files, which are available at 1 cent per file, would be $32,716.66 cash money. So it's important to understand that we're not going to make anything available that's not already available to you by going on our website and purchasing it.
So what kind of information can
you get? Absolutely,
yes.
That's a great question. You can get your full name. You can get the date that you actually registered to vote for the first time. You can get your address that you have as your record. If you have a telephone number or an email address listed, that's also available. You can get a history of how many times you voted and in what cycles that you voted. You can say whether or not an individual participated in the Democrat or Republican primary. All of that information is available. That's how you're already contacted by people who reach out through robocalls or people who send you direct mail.
Well, it seems to me that, everybody is wanting to make sure we have fair elections. Again, I sort of go back to the states' rights thing, and you really monitored our elections quite carefully, and I don't remember you saying anything about any type of voter fraud here. There were some incidents in another state where some people got into their files, but it doesn't show any voter fraud per se that we know of.
No, and we're not aware of any kind of breach or any kind of overreach that actually took place in the 2016 election cycle in the state of Alabama. None of that information has been introduced to us. Now, we have had selected cases of fraudulent activity that have been reported to us. When they've been reported, we've identified those individuals. We're investigating those individuals. Where it's warranted, they'll be indicted, and then we'll have them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Secretary Merrill, we've only got about a minute, and I want to address a question that you may or may not want to answer. You've done a great job at being Secretary of State. This is universally known. Anybody that has to do with that office, you brought it into the 21st century. You seem to be happy where you are. Are you going to run for Secretary of State again, or are you looking at another office at this time?
Well, you're so kind to think that I'm even capable of doing anything other than what I'm already doing, Bill. And I have received an unbelievable amount of support and encouragement to look at other offices. I had people encourage me to look at the U.S. Senate vacancy that will start the process August 15th. I've had people talk to me about running for lieutenant governor or governor, but we've not made a formal announcement about our intentions, but we intend to do so soon.
Okay, so this is a non-committal commitment, a commitment to say something soon.
As soon as we still got you in public service, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
John, and I will say I think you're doing an excellent job.
Thank you, Jack.
I'm a critic of everyone, but I will say you've really done a great job.
It's your role, Jack, and we love it because you embrace it.
You are a curmudgeon. Is that the right word for you?
I've been called that often.
Often. Well, Secretary Merrill, thank you for joining us today. And will you stick around for the special session?
I'd be delighted.
And we apologize for the beep they're working on.
It sounds like
the
a-
elevator. I
sounds
thought
like a
Nancy
game of
Worley was
Taboo
in
back
and she was backing up, but apparently it's the elevator.
Where's the beep? Okay, you're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more news and analysis. Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. But before we get into this, I want to put a disclaimer. I respect people of faith. I think I am one, but I don't wear it, tattooed on my forehead or on my sleeve. I do, however, take exception when Luther Strange comes out with craziness saying that the election of Donald Trump was a miracle of biblical proportion. This man got elected We've had, 44 other people be elected, not 44 people, but 44 other times
Other
we've done
elections.
this, and they were no miracles. I really do wish we would stop sounding like the Taliban and that God puts everybody in charge. I think God was maybe with me when I was voting, but did not give me his advice on my decision.
Right. Well, and I completely, I believe that, you know, when you go to cast your ballot, you should pray about who to vote for.
Sure.
You should
Have no problem
have
with
your heart and your head in the same place when you cast your ballot. But, you know, if I had $1 for every candidate, sometimes all of them in the same race who said that God told them to run, I mean, I could retire right now.
Well, God can't put Obama there and then Trump there, and you know, because it doesn't make sense. God's not schizophrenic.
And I'm sorry, but a miracle.
But he is a jokester.
Yeah, a miracle actually, by definition, is something that happens outside the natural realm. So people casting a vote for Donald Trump is not outside the natural realm. I'm sorry.
But
we
this
can
is
watch the
pandering,
math.
Jack. Isn't
Oh,
it?
it's, you know, of course it's pandering. You know, look at Roy Moore, the 10 Commandment panderer. He's the king panderer, and he's got this underground whisper campaign against Mo Brooks because Mo at one time was a Mormon. Well, I think Mormons, I may not agree with them, they don't make bad U.S. citizens or haven't proven to be. Orrin Hatch is a Mormon from Utah, and I think one of our great senators.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I have no problem with that.
Mitt Romney
Mitt
was
Romney
a Mormon.
was.
But Mo
Is.
is no
Is.
longer a practicing Mormon, but they're doing a cheap campaign against him.
Yeah, well, listen, you know, the Mormons I have known have been some of the most honest, decent. I mean, Howard Hughes could trust the Mormons with his money, Jack.
But
That's true.
Jack hit the nail on the head, though, by saying the fact that which God somebody worships has no bearing on their ability to analyze policy that will be constitutionally sound under our government. Like, it has no bearing.
What they're doing is trying to run on an emotional basis
Right.
and not on
Well,
their
I mean-
experience or their credentials.
But if we're going to do that, Luther's an Episcopalian. That's practically Catholic, and he's trying to go for the conservative Baptist vote, so that's just confusing.
Well, the thing that's crazy is, you know, they're trying to make Mo Brooks sound like some kind of insider when Luther Strange, before elected office, was a D.C. lobbyist for 20-something years.
I tell you what problems they've got. A poll came out this last week, and this came from the Mo Brooks camp. It's got Moore at 27%, Strange at 23%, and Brooks at 21%, with the fourth candidate at 5%. So you take that 5% and you apply it to either one of those, Mo Brooks or Strange, there's where your problem is that they're trying to overcome with all of this slapping on the Bible.
Well, listen, anytime they, you know, obviously they're going after Brooks because he's a threat, but really, could we just stick to the issues for once in a
Yeah,
while?
because you're not, once they're up there, they're not voting on religious issues
No.
because we have separation of church and state, theoretically. But they're up there to vote on other things. I don't care whether they're Jewish or they're Catholic or I prefer not a Muslim at this point in time, but if they are,
That's coming.
I saw that rolling of the eyes there, Beth. But,
They can legislate just the same as everybody else. I don't understand.
okay, that's fine.
Well,
But-
and let me say this: the separation of church and state is right. Separation of God and country, we don't have to do that. We don't have to separate God from the country. But when you look at the Declaration of Independence, it says nature's God, and you know, everybody can do that. But there's nowhere in the Constitution that says you've got to be a Christian,
Right,
or
right.
Catholic, or a Jew, or a Buddhist.
They don't
too.
want to run on their credentials because they don't have enough. They're afraid of what experience they have. They're afraid people won't see it. So they know this can be a unifying thing, and I
now
think
they've
that's wrong.
But yeah, and that's the thing is now you've got Mo Brooks conflating the issues, coming out with this ad saying, "I'll stand up and read the King James Bible until they build the
Well,
wall."
at
Like,
least
are you
he's reading
kidding
the
me?
King James version because that's my favorite version. I like that. I don't like these New English versions and all that. I mean, when I studied under the King James version, but you know, that's the other thing. Look, we have choices in America. We have denominations. We have a right to it. And I don't know, you know, it reminds me of the church, Jack. You know, they split off from each other because one church said that Adam and Eve weren't born with navels, and the other church said, well, they had navels.
And I believe they became the Church of Christ of the Navalites.
The
I think
first church of the Navalites. Yeah,
That's what
they
it was.
believed that they had navels.
No kidding, that's a real story.
So you can divide over anything silly, right, Beth?
Right. Well, we're about to watch the second congressional do that too. It's going to be fun.
Before we go too far off and make all our viewers mad, the USS Ivey is sailing, and I'm not sure where the direction is because this is the most secretive, insular administration we've ever seen. I mean, nobody knows what they're doing up there. And you get these peaks of where she fired Jim Perdue, great guy. She hired somebody.
With no reasoning. She didn't give a reason.
I think there's 90,000 reasons, Beth. You know, we learned that Jim Perdue, and I think it was on your radio show, Jim Perdue said that.
No, he didn't.
No, he didn't.
No.
It was somebody else's show.
But he said before the show. So.
Before the show. I heard, okay, how about that? And I know this is true because we looked it up. Brian Taylor, who serves as Kay Ivey's chief legal advisor, his wife had a contract before Jim Perdue and the Department of Mental Health for $90,000. Jim Perdue would not sign it.
Well,
didn't think it was
but
proper.
Jim said he thought that Jessica Taylor was very competent and did good work. He was uncomfortable because of the fact that Brian had, since that contract was presented, had been hired in the governor's office, and he thought that was something that he needed to avoid.
Well, Brian wrote the Ethics Commission saying there was no, he wanted full disclosure. But listen, he got a big fat raise. You don't want to make the chief legal counsel mad. I'm just saying there may not be anything. It may be that he voted for or pushed this autism bill. It may be none of the above. But I know of at least 90,000 reasons that he might have gotten fired.
Well, and like we've always said, and we said last week, when it doesn't make sense, follow the money. And that's one of the biggest motivators I've ever seen in Montgomery for something getting done around here. It's really the only time anything gets done around here is when there's money involved.
Well,
You're absolutely right.
Well, they want to get paid. Everybody wants to get paid.
Wait until we have a special session on the prisons, if we do.
Yeah,
Ooh,
yeah.
Betty.
You know, she's trying not to have one from what we hear, but again, nobody knows. But we're going to have to leave it right there. You've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. You watch us because we watch them. Welcome back to The V, the special session. Today we have Secretary of State John Merrill. Thank you, sir, for staying around with us.
Thank you, Bill.
Susan, you probably spent more time on the Secretary of State site than anybody else. I mean, you kind of live and breathe on that thing,
I
don't
do,
you?
and bless the people that work in that department because they field my calls all the time. I even called him this last week to say, I've got some anomalies. But I have to hand it to you. You've really brought this website into the 20th century, much more user-friendly, not as clunky. It's really looking good.
Thank you, Susan. I think this is important to introduce at this point. My philosophy about working with state agencies or entities or visiting state buildings or federal buildings is that an individual who's never been there before, never visited the website, never been to a public location, should be able to get out of their vehicle or should be able to get on their computer, go where they want to go, find what they want to find, and leave by themselves without having to call anybody, check anything out, because the people that are in those environments work for that individual, and that individual needs to be able to navigate or negotiate their way wherever they want to go. And if we're not able to produce that for that individual to consume at the level that they wish to, we need to reevaluate what we're doing and why we're doing it. So when you say that, it means a lot to us because we have a team that's dedicated to making sure that people know that we work for them.
As you know, our team has grown, and it's so beneficial to us because a lot of people that have never worked in campaign finance before are finding it easy to find the information that I send to look at. The other thing that I was really pleased with was the video that you put out, it's instructing candidates how to file their campaign finance reports, because those are confusing. We're going to have a lot of new candidates coming in this time, so I give you kudos for that, because it's really, really step by step, inch by inch what you need to do.
Our election team, in Brittany Hamilton, who is one of our top assistants in the office, she is outstanding, a graduate of Faulkner University. She's been with us since we started, January the 19th, 2015. Brittany created this video, and she did it in a sequence with 4 parts, Jack, and I know this is important to you because this would be an irritant to you, is that people visit that area, they see that video, and instead of having to watch all 8 minutes every time they go, if they're only interested in a certain area, they only want to know certain things like closing out a campaign account or starting a campaign account, then they can just watch that segment if they'd like to. So it might go anywhere between 1.5 minutes to 2.5 minutes. They don't have to watch the full 8 minutes plus every time they go there. So we've tried to make it as user-friendly as possible.
Well, you have, you and I had this discussion about 1.5 years ago about you're starting to scrutinize the reports of people who are candidates or elected office holders who file their campaign finance reports to make sure it matches up with the people who contributed the money.
Yes, sir.
And I think in a phone conversation recently, you said you had found some discrepancies.
Irregularities.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And we actually had that conversation about 3 years ago. Because when I was campaigning for the office, it was one of the things that you and I discussed on your radio show.
Right.
And it was a big irritation to you. And the thing that irritated me, Jack, is that people file that paperwork and it's recorded in the office of the Secretary of State, but then nobody ever did anything with it.
That's right.
So if someone like you or Susan wanted to look at it and check it out, you certainly could if you could find your way to the files and you could get the information that you wanted. But we didn't have anybody in the office that was checking that information out. So what we did when we took office on January the 19th, 2015, we went back to the entire 2014 election cycle, which began June the 3rd, 2013,
right,
and went all the way up until the annual reports were completed in January 2015 for that 14 cycle. We've done the same thing in each consecutive cycle since that time to evaluate all of the reports, to report things to the Ethics Commission that have been out of line, to have conversations with the candidates or with the office holders when we've seen irregularities or inconsistencies that need to be corrected.
And remember now, those 2013 and 2014 reports, most of that was paper reports.
That's
Those
correct.
are scans,
That's correct.
not the electronic version. So there's more work there than
It's a lot
just the
better
average
now
person
when
thinks.
we've got it electronically, but I do say it's been very helpful. We've tracked a number of stories off that type of work. There's been, in 2013, I think it was, there were some adjustments to the ability for candidates to have 501c4s, these what we in the press business refer to as dark money PACs.
Right.
And we've seen the rise in these dark money PACs, even though they're frowned upon. And can you address a little bit about how candidates are using this, and is it really a good idea?
Well, it's difficult to say because it depends on what the end game is of the individual that's attempting to go that direction. What we encourage all of our candidates and all of our office holders to do is to make sure that they're following the law. They're following not just the intent of the law, but the spirit of the law as well. And when you start to get outside that framework is when you start to run into problems. We've seen documented instances of that. We've had instances that we've identified that have not been publicly reported where that's occurred. And we want to make sure that we're helping people accomplish their goals and solve their problems and do what they want to do, but not go beyond what the scope and reason is of the use of that particular entity. You know, one of the things that's been a constant irritation for Jack, I hate to keep going back to you.
But he's constantly irritated, so I mean, there's nothing new about that. I have to sit next to him every week.
But one of the things that people have been able to do before is take their American Express bill and write a check for $8,918.21 and turn that in and say that's a campaign expense. Well, you can't do that anymore because we have a credit card an extended line of credit is what we call it, but a credit card report that you have to fill out if you use a credit card.
Thank you.
And in doing that, it lets someone see, did you pay for Alabama or Auburn football tickets out of
Right,
that?
you have to itemize.
Did you go to the Beau Rivage? And were you at Beau Rivage just because you wanted a social event or because you were attending a conference? Did you pay with your campaign money? Did you pay for alcohol expenses? Those things are things that people want to know.
Right.
I've seen those expenses exceed $32,000 when they just one-line it on a credit card. That's a lot of money to not tell the voter what that is.
Do you ever recommend legislation to clean up some of this stuff? For example, people always say, I loaned my campaign $120,000. There's no paperwork. There's no proof of that. So what some of these shady characters are doing is claiming to loan the campaign $120,000 when in fact they didn't, yet they paid themselves back out of the campaign account for debt that really wasn't there.
And it also gets them out of the campaign window. They get an extra 120 days if they got campaign debt.
That's correct.
To
Can we
raise
clean
money.
that up? Can you recommend legislation?
Sometimes, and Jack, you know this from all the work for all the years that you've spent at 11 South Union. Sometimes it's better to use existing law and to perhaps change the way that that existing law is being enforced than it is to try to introduce new law.
Okay, that's fine.
And that's one of the things we've tried to do through administrative rule and through changing the processes for filing that had not been done before. Because if we do it that way consistently, so people know what the expectation is, then they start to change or modify their behavior.
Okay,
and
that's
we've
cool with me.
seen some of that because some of the things that have happened.
Last question. What has been the most surprising thing that you have experienced being Secretary of State?
I think the most surprising thing that we've experienced is how eager our team members were to have leadership that enabled them to change the way that they were conducting themselves and the way they were doing business in the office of the Secretary of State. We have gone from 49 to 37 employees. We have reduced spending by more than $1.9 million cash money that we have saved. We've evaluated each and every contractual agreement. We've laid expectations on our people so that they know what the end game will be, which is show up to work on time, give us a full day's work while you're there, and we will reward you every time we can. You don't get fours just because on your evaluation because you can show up and fog a mirror. People initially were reluctant to accept that type of leadership, but now they know that our expectation is that we work for the people of the state of Alabama. And because we work for the people of the state of Alabama, we're not working at the speed of government anymore. We're working at the speed of business. In the area of voting and electioneering, we are making sure it's easy to vote and hard to cheat. And we work for the people of the state of Alabama. And that's the thing that has been the most surprising is how those people have embraced that and they've said, we want to be a part of this and we want to move forward with you as you try to make Alabama the best it can be.
Well, it's all about leadership when it comes to that thing, and thank you for yours.
Yes, sir.
Thanks,
Thank you.
John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama, our special session. Our guest has been Secretary of State John Merrill.